Gary. Do you know what movie that's from? Say it out loud if you know. Go ahead, say it. 1, 2, 3, say it. One of my favorite quotes that I use all the time. A young Joaquin Phoenix, and Diane Weiss would say it every time he came into the room to make him feel comfortable. Hi, Gary. I am Paul Bartholomew, and this is I Want to Hold Your Band. Today's guest is heavy metal rock legend, Mr. John Bush. He's the lead singer of Armored Saint, former lead singer of Anthrax, and as I came to find out, or as I actually asked him about because I had seen it, was asked by Metallica in early days to be their lead singer. But you'll hear all about that as you listen to the episode. We talk about so many great things. I could have talked to him for hours. Anyway, we talk about his band Armored Saint, Black Sabbath, Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind & Fire, UFO, Gogo Bordello, who is so cool and so odd and so wonderful. As always, the links to the songs we talk about are in the episode description, so you can click them and vibe along with us. And also, I encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already. I would love that. Otherwise, without further ado, Mr. John Bush.
My voice is the, it's the bane of my existence in a way, because I'm always worried about it. I'm always thinking about it. I beat it up, It's singing heavy metal music is like it's very physical. It's a very physical thing. So, and I oversing. I have for years. I probably need to pull it back, and I'm 61, so I don't know when I'm going to learn to do that. But yeah, it's hard work. You're an athlete, so you're, and you're, if you're injured, you're injured. So that's the bottom line, and that's how the perspective. It kind of helps a little bit.
So the first question I always start with is, do you remember the first piece of music, artist, album that came into your life when you were younger?
We had a bunch of Beatle records. So at this point, I was probably about 5. So I was born in 63, so it was around 68, 69. But it was the early Beatle records. It was like Meet the Beatles and Hard Day's Night and stuff that I remember listening to, which at that point were already kind of old for the Beatles, because they were already into Abbey Road and the White Album and stuff. Yeah, Sgt. Pepper. I was listening to those on my parents' big giant stereo system that was, ones with the 2 big speakers, all encompassed, and listening to it in the front room, probably with my blanket and my dog. And
with your blanket?
With my blanket. I had an issue with blankets, although my kids still do, and they're 18 and 20, and they still have their blankets.
Oh, they do?
They do.
Oh, that's sweet.
It's pretty cute. It's pretty funny. But yeah, so I listened to those records, and they were inspiring even then. I think that's what kind of started me really digging music, and I was probably like 5, 6 years old. There was like Engelbert Humperdinck records. There was obviously some Frank and Dino records. I remember like Herb Alpert record, so they were actually listening to some cool stuff.
Yeah.
But they weren't like that deep into music, but they did have some cool records of that time.
Do you remember them listening to it? Would they put it on a lot, or was it really you grabbing your blanket and...
I don't remember them listening to it. My parents' front room was very uncomfortable, uninviting. It was one of those things where I don't remember plastic on the couches and stuff, but it was just kind of was this room where that we had a den, so that was the primary room that people went in to watch TV, and it was off the kitchen, so it was a little more inviting and comfortable. But the front room, because we had the den, the front room was kind of the place where maybe when some special guests or relatives came over,
like a sitting room,
which again was uncomfortable. It was not a place that was inviting, but that's where the stereo was, because it was big. They should have put it in the den. And then they could turn the TV off, and everybody's TV was on probably 24/7.
Were your 2 older brothers, did they have any sort of musical influence as you started to move away from the Beatles? Did they have any influence on you?
So again, it was my brother Tony who actually was the one, for some reason I remember him kind of playing me stuff. So a distinct memory I have is a little older. I was probably about 9, because I feel like I was in the 4th grade. And then he played the first Black Sabbath song, So the first Black Sabbath song with the rain coming down and, Ozzy's, it's very ominous and, just a dark sounding song. And it's a great, it's a classic song, it's a classic heavy metal song, and it really is the perfect heavy metal song, if you will. I remember being really scared. And I think his objective was to kind of make me a little scared. But
did he say, "Hey, John, come in here"?
He did. And then he played it, turned the lights out, and
he did.
Oh yeah. And so I remember being fearful because it was scary, and I was 9. But at the same time, of course, kind of being intrigued, and just being feeling, going, "Wow, it's drawing me in." And then that started listening to Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, and then he was the one that kind of exposed me to that. I remember listening to the Led Zeppelin 4 record, which was on that that particular 8-track, that's how old it was, which are 8-tracks were funky, they would change in the middle of the song. And it was the track listing was incorrect. So like 4 Sticks, I thought was always called Misty Mountain Hop, and Misty Mountain Hop was because the listing on it was incorrect. It was weird. But, loving those particular 2 records, I can remember the first Black Sabbath and the Led Zeppelin 4 record. And writing that on my Peachy at school after a while.
Your
and
Peachy? What's a Peachy?
Oh, you know what Peachy is?
I was like, your Peachy?
Peachy was like a folder that had all these different athletes on it. One, you put stuff in it. I was, again, like 9 or 10 years old. So it was whatever I was from school that I was writing and notes and stuff. And on the Peachy, there was all these different athletes. And then people would draw different things on the athletes. Yeah. So anyways, that I would write Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and at that point, I don't think many 9-year-olds were listening to that. And at least in El Sereno, California, where I was growing up, and probably anywhere, because I was young. And
Wow.
that was like got me motivated on rock music and pop music. But my older brother Mike, he is 5 years older, and he had some influence. He got into like musicals and stuff. He was an actor for a while, and he some drama at the local church, and he did like Godspell, and which is great. I love Godspell. That's a great record and great music in that play. So he kind of exposed me to some of that stuff. Again, when it comes to music, like one of the questions I forgot you asked, like what would you might be embarrassed to say you listen to, but still like
obscure.
It. And and I was like, there's nothing. I mean, there's things that I don't particularly like. Like I'm not a big fan of modern country music.
Yeah.
Although I love old school country music.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of some modern pop, at least stuff that you would hear on like Kiss FM.
Right.
There's some great like pop artists that I think are amazing of the modern era. Guys like Liam Bridges, Hozier. There's a really cool artists that are killer. But I think that's not quite. When I think of pop music, I think of like I mean, look, Bruno Mars is super talented, but like a lot of stuff that it all just sounds like to me a lot of the times like one producer, one writer.
Right.
And it just sounds like across the board, I can't differentiate people's individuality.
Yeah.
And I've tried. I compare, everything to everything. You can't just say, this is where I'm at today and these are my peers and I compare to them. No, if you're a pop star of the modern era, how do you compare to the Beatles? Because that's where you should look at where you're at. Same for Armored Saint as a rock heavy metal band. We can't just say, how are we amongst our peers? How are we comparing to Black Sabbath? Yes, you don't compare because they're the kings, but you should have those same aspirations.
Yeah.
And so I do that when I listen to music. I say, how does it compare? I don't just say, oh, it's good for now. It's like, nah,
Right.
How does it really fit into the big scope of all pop music that started back in the 50s? It's very important for me as a singer and musician in my age to still listen to lots of new music. I don't want to be this fuddy-duddy who's like, it was better in my day. And no. That, to me, that's a big problem if you do that, and you're cutting out a lot of potential things to open your eyes. And I want to listen to lots of new music, and I do. So it's really, it's important. I might go, well, I don't like it, and that's just the way it is.
That's art too. I mean, it's like you like think, some things you love, some things you like, some things you're like, I appreciate it, but I'm not gonna, yeah. Before I start and ask you about a few things on your list, do you remember the first piece of music that you went to the store and got?
Yeah, I think it was a Zeppelin record. I think it was Zeppelin 2. Again, I was probably, around that age, 9, 8, somewhere around there. I went to a local record store. I think it was called Kaz Cameras. They sold cameras. It was on Eastern Avenue in El Sereno, where I grew up, and probably sold cameras and records, and it was probably like a novelty shop of some sorts.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I went and got it. And again, that was inspired probably by my hearing those songs by my brother, and so I went in and wanted to buy that record. And then I think the next record was Kiss Alive, because Kiss was starting to blow up at that point too.
Yeah.
I definitely started having a record collection as and as records were awesome, and I see vinyl right there on your shelf, and I still buy vinyl, and I love vinyl. And luckily, Metal Blade Records, which is the record company that Armored Saint belongs to, has always made LPs of all our records, which is killer and very good packaging. So it's great. I love vinyl. I mean, it's had a little resurrection. It's never going to be like it was. It's sad, but I still think vinyl sounds the best.
Okay, so let's go. I want to start between like in middle school and high school. It seems like there's a lot of artists on there that you were really absorbing their sound, their music, or something? That was a big time for you, maybe?
I think it was. It's just really when music, I was becoming a teenager, and I think it was, amongst my peers, and we were all discovering all the different bands. And I think that was when we were just kind of figuring out, music was really taking shape in our lives. It was funny because, like, once Armored Saint actually became a band and we started making records, and that was the 80s. Our first record came out in 83, and then we were really part of the 80s, which is cool. I'm very stoked that I'm actually in a band that started in the 80s, because the 80s are looked at in a very fond way. But I don't think the 80s musically was as inspiring to me as the 70s were, because the 70s is when I just kind of really was discovering music. So even though I'm a person, my career kind of started in the 80s, it's really the 70s that really formed it for me. But I think it was Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, those two bands, who I think those are the two bands that did it for me, And to this day, Zeppelin is a band that I think is still probably the greatest rock band, and Robert Plant is still one of the greatest singers. And I think Led Zeppelin is the one that actually took it to another level in kind of doing what I've said a lot of bands and artists aren't really able to do or wanting to do, and that is just to push the envelope. And to always push the envelope. I think that what was really cool about Zeppelin, when they made like Led Zeppelin 3 and half the record was just acoustic songs, that was a very bold step for them to do that, because they were this bluesy, hard rock band. And then they just said, we're making half this record acoustic, which, again, it was so adventurous. And I think that is the key, that even though I play in a hard rock heavy metal band, I think that my aspirations as a writer and creator is always to just say nothing is off limits, and when it goes to creating. And I think that those bands kind of had that effect on me, and those two in particular. And so I think that's still the mentality. I think that when we write as a band like Armored Saint, we were willing to try anything. And if we feel like something is going too far out of the box, which doesn't happen that often, but if we do, then we could always rein it back in. Yeah. But, because we don't want to lose the roots of what we are. And we don't want to, I'm not here to try to convince, the Armored Saint fan that our new record is a country / trip hop / techno record. You're a heavy metal, bluesy band, and like, come on, man. But again, you can instill different ideas into writing and creating and try things. And I think as long as you're willing to try that and bring it in somehow, some way, if it can work, using maybe different instruments and whatever it is, I think that's really an important thing to do. And I think we try to do that, and we still do that, and we've done that on our most recent record, and we're using different approaches to writing and arranging and time signatures and instruments and whatever it is, to always be open. And I think that helps you just keep growing.
I'm so interested. This was kind of a question I had, and it dovetails into what you're saying is, when you started Armored Saint, with all that background, with knowing all the things you just said about Black Sabbath and about Led Zeppelin, did you have a conscious choice about what type of metal you wanted to be? Did you think that you wanted to be a version of this with this, or did you just kind of let it take you as you created?
Well, okay, so to be fair, when we actually started forming that band in like 1981, 82, it was the beginning of the new wave of British heavy metal movement. And it was also, that was happening, so bands like Iron Maiden, Saxon, Motorhead, Def Leppard, those bands were all really coming out of Britain and starting to blow up and happen. And at the same time, there was the scene in LA that was happening at the same time, which was Quiet Riot and Motley Crue and Rat. So those records and those bands were starting to happen at the same time. So we have to be fair and say that a lot of that was inspiring us at the time as well, because we were like, look at these bands and they're blowing up, and we listen to Iron Maiden and Motorhead, and they those are killer records and bands that were really inspiring us at the time. So for sure that did have an influence at that particular time as to a direction that probably we wanted to kind of take, without, of course, copying those bands or trying to sound too much like those bands. Then eventually we became of the Los Angeles scene. We started playing. We started getting popular in the LA scene, and we were part of the same scene as bands like Great White and Wasp and Steeler and Rat, and we played with all these groups, and then we were part of that too. So around '83, Armored Saint was like one of the most popular local bands in LA. The key thing for us is that as much as we liked those bands, and we liked a lot of American bands for sure, bands like Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, we love those bands, but we were really enamored with what was happening in Britain. Not only the bands like Iron Maiden and Motorhead, like I said, but bands before them, UFO, Thin Lizzy, who is one of my favorite bands, and the Scorpions, and bands that were, they seemed a little harder than what was really coming out of LA. I guess my point is that you are motivated by the peers that you're in. And also those things that inspired us from the 70s, the soul groups that we liked, like Earth, Wind & Fire and the Commodores and, Stevie Wonder. Those artists were still having a lot of inspiration on Armored Saint too. So as much as we loved all those hard rock bands, we were listening to all those other groups. I remember coming home from junior high and putting on Kiss Alive and loving it, and taking it off and putting on Earth, Wind & Fire Gratitude. And that record has just as much of an inspiration to me as Kiss Alive did, and impact on me. And I loved it, and to this day still do, of course. So I think that we always wanted to have this kind of soulful thing and bluesy thing, and encompass the two kind of hard rock, heavy metal sounds that were coming out of England at that time, and at the same time try to bring in some of those R&B elements. And that's what kind of really started shaping me as a singer. But eventually, as time went on, I really kind of figured the best way to become the best singer I can be is to just try to be the best singer I can be.
Yeah.
And really try to use all these different influences and let it bring something out in me and out of the tone that I was creating in my soul, and then just let it happen. And it takes a while for you to do that.
So I'm going to go to Stevie Wonder. One of your favorite songs you have is Golden Lady.
Yeah. Did
that come to you at that time, kind of when you were listening to all that?
I mean, I knew it, of course. I probably have more appreciation for Golden Lady now. A funny story with my wife. We redid our vows. We've done it every 10 to 5 years. And so we did it. We did it on the top of the building of our old studio. And so I was like, I want to do this song. When we first got married, I wanted to play Golden Lady at our wedding, and she poo-pooed it. And I was like, what? And I was like, wow, really? And I don't know why, but anyway. So when we redid our vows, I actually, we had a PA, and I said, I'm going to sing you this song, because I love this song, and I'm going to do it. And she was like, okay, yeah, let's do it, of course. And it was really cool. So
wow,
anyway,
that must have been special to do that. Yeah.
But that's a Killer Records, Intervisions. I mean, there's so many great tracks on that. Obviously, Higher Ground. Everyone knows that one, and Living in the City. And
how about a couple of those from that time? So this is these are similar time frames. That record was '73. One is the song "Call on Me" by Chicago, and the other is the album "Rocks" by Aerosmith.
Yeah. Well, "Call on Me" was cool. I distinctly remember being in Pop Warner or playing football, and the cheerleaders practicing at our junior high, and they did a little thing with their cheer, pom poms and stuff to "Call on Me," and probably I was going, look at these girls, and I was a teenager. I was like, it was hormones are kicking in,
right.
and some of them were cute, and so I mean, but they played that song, and so I have the memory of watching them learn this, routine, and then that song playing, and that's just such a killer song. I mean, Chicago was one of those bands again. I mean, obviously having the brass section, took it to a whole nother level. Having 8, 9 guys in the band.
Yeah.
But Saturday in the Park, and Call on Me, and Beginnings, and all those songs. Those are just the pop songs that everyone knows, and the records are amazing. And then what else? Rocks.
Rocks.
It's a great record from front to back. It's one of those records that, I mean, it's just one of those albums it's probably a perfect rock album, and it's funny, at that time we would either somebody bought the record, or I think Joey, the bass player in my band, had that record, and but we would still listen to it in countless hours of the day, and it was just it just had a lot of impact. I mean, what I would do is I would put these records on, and just start singing to them. And that's kind of how I started developing as a singer. And which the funny thing about it is that, like, when I'm in between tours, if I'm like, the last thing I want to do is sing to Armored Saint songs. I'm on tour with Armored Saint, so I don't want to sing these songs when I'm not on tour,
Right.
just because like I don't want to get burned out on them. So I have an iPod, which I still love, and I'll just go through my catalog and just sing to various records, various bands of various different genres. Sorry, Chris. And like today's Aerosmith rocks. Tomorrow might be Lynyrd Skynyrd Street Survivors. The next day might be Intervisions. And just sing to them, and just so I can keep my voice in check. It's because you need to train and keep practicing and keep it going. Back then, it was how I was learning how to sing. So I would emulate and just copy, people from Steven Tyler to Phil Mogg of UFO to Stevie Wonder to Maurice White, you name it, all these different musicians. I think that the primary goal after all these years, the thing I finally learned is really about just being the best that you can be. It's hard. We did have an old manager back in the day. He did most of the stuff. He didn't do a good job with us. I won't mention names, but he did say one thing to me, and I thought it always kind of resonated. And he was like, when we were kind of starting off and trying to make it, he was like, you need to have blinders on, like a horse has blinders on in a race. He goes, because if you're doing that all the time, if you're always looking, then you're just you're going to get caught up in who's doing what and why they're there and why you're not. And he goes, you just have to just be like a horse in a race and just not look and go finish line. And I always thought that was some good advice, because you got to just do your thing and bring the most out of you.
Yeah.
And that's what I finally discovered. It took a while, like I said earlier, but I think the goal is to actually my thing is when you hear me, that's me, John Bush. That's his voice. You know it in the rock world, and hopefully that's, I don't have like this incredible octave and 5-octave range. That's irrelevant to me. It's just all about that voice. You hear it, you know it, and that's and bringing the most out of me as a performer and singer is the most out of what I can do with this body of mine.
Yeah, so. I don't do too much. I'll get some basic information like of a guest, but I don't want to know too much because I also just want to have a talk and get it out. Metallica actually asked you to be. Yeah. I just thought of that because you said that's John Bush's voice. Was that a thing for you? Like, did you have to think, this doesn't match my style or my vibe or for whatever reason, or is that even a true thing?
Well, no, it is a true thing. Yeah, I was asked to join Metallica in like 1983. I guess James Hetfield, who's the guitar player and the singer, and then obviously one of the biggest rock stars in the world as far as hard rock and heavy metal goes. And I love James; he's amazing. He actually they came to our show recently in Columbus. We played a festival and Metallica was on it. And we went on in the day, and Lars and James and Robert came and watched us. We have this history with him, but I guess back in that day, James was just maybe a little insecure about his voice and wasn't sure he wanted to be the singer. He was a guitar player and sang, and so they were entertaining getting a singer. And Armored Saint and Metallica were just kind of starting to happen, and I was like, I'm flattered, but like my band's happening. Like,
I got my thing.
And I grew up with them, and it's like we literally grew up. We've known each other since we were like 9 years old. So I was like, I don't really want to leave. It doesn't feel right. But I'm flattered. No one had the foresight to know that Metallica was going to be the giant juggernaut they would. And it doesn't matter anyway. I was just that was never my fate to be in Metallica. But there is still this one clip I did at their 30th anniversary party where they did these 4 shows in San Francisco at the Fillmore, where they did it only for fan club people, and it was great. And they had all these different people come in and play and talk, and all these different artists who they've been connected. On that night, it was Lou Reed and Marianne Faithfull and King Diamond, and all these different Kid Rock played right before us because he did. It was just a lot of people correlated with them through their career. And Armored Saint opened that particular show because there was 4 of them. And then they brought me out and they told the story of like, we wanted this guy. And he actually said no. But this is how it would sound like if we would have, if he would join. So we played a song from, and you could see it on YouTube.
What song did you do?
Four Horsemen. It's from their first record. And we did it. And it was like, it was just a legendary moment for me.
That's cool, man.
It was awesome.
One last thing I want to ask you, because we kind of got to all the things on my list just organically, which is really
great.
Cool, really cool. But what this gem, and it's later in life, so it probably is just something you discovered. But I just want, so it's talked about and it's on the list, because I briefly listened to Start Wearing Purple by is it Gogo Bordello?
Yeah, Gogo Bordello.
incredible. Like, where did you find them, and what are they? The album's Gypsy Punks,
Yeah.
Underdog World Strike.
Yeah,
Like,
I forgot who told me about Gogo Bordello.
you just have as one of your favorite songs you like.
Yeah, but somebody did. The guitar player, the singer, is the main guy, Eugene Hudson, I believe is his name. He's from Ukraine originally, but then he moved to New York. And that band is just one of these really, really cool. I mean, like when you watch them, you're like, "What is this that I'm watching?"
I listened for like 20 seconds. I don't like to listen to too much because I want to wait and hear what you have to say about it. I was like, "What is this?"
Yeah, I mean,
why do I love it so much?
They have the accordion player, they have the violin player, they have the guy who's like kind of a rapper who kind of sings around him sometimes. They have the girls who sing, and I mean, they're just a really, really cool, super inventive band.
Unique.
Talk about taking what you are, your body, your soul, your origins, his Ukrainian background, and then he went to live in New York, and and they brought that out as well. But you feel that when you listen to them, and it's really cool.
Well, dude, this is amazing. I could literally talk to you like your whole list. It was tough. I had so many questions about so many things I didn't get to, but
well, we'll do a part 2 one day.
I love it. I love it.
I'm glad we did this too. I'm glad that I was able to talk about a lot of the great musicians and artists who inspired me through the years, because I have to give them love.
Yeah, man.
Without them, there's no me.
I love it. Well, thanks for talking to me, brother.
Thanks.
All right.